In so many respects, social media has become a plague upon all of our lives. It has caused a spike in childhood depression, an attempted insurrection, and worst of all, it sometimes leads to old friends trying to reconnect with you. The likes of Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey certainly have a great deal to answer for. Whilst MySpace helped us discover new music from underground artists, and Bebo taught us that Jordan Henderson is an absolute madman who's scared of nothing, which is probably what bagged him a gorgeous girl like Sarah, Twitter has facilitated politically polarizing bots originating from Russia, Iran, and Myanmar to influence elections and regime change. Meanwhile, Facebook has radicalized everyone's parents into believing that a wave of transgender revolutionaries and people of color are coming after their way of life, and now they can't understand why their children and grandchildren aren't as racist as them. Even the platform upon which I'm airing these grievances, and the one in which I make my living, is not without culpability, and you could quite legitimately accuse me of biting the hand that feeds me. YouTube has a recommendation algorithm which has promoted cranks and conspiracy theories even to those with no interest in them. It has allowed Logan Paul to retain some degree of relevance within an online sphere, and they demonetized a load of my videos because I mentioned World War II. Yes, social media is often a veritable smorgasbord of bad ideas. In a world where clicks are king, truth is an afterthought, and the idea of actually having any fun online has been consigned to the dustbin of time. As with any facet of society that is as far-reaching as social media, it is only natural that it has encroached upon, if not entirely engulfed, the world of football. For the record, I'm not just talking about the spate of vile online abuse that we have seen directed at black players particularly within the English game over the last 12 months, though that is disgusting. Where it had become unacceptable on most terraces to throw fruit at black players, do monkey chants, or throw around the N-word since the 1980s, with a few very notable exceptions, it appears that all those established social norms no longer apply on social media. Of course, this is an issue that extends far beyond football, and it often irritates me when people say that football has a problem with racism. Well, yes, it clearly does, but football does not exist in a vacuum. The idea that you can combat racism in football without addressing racism in our press and parliaments in particular is frankly laughable. One more quick point on this, despite the fact that I just said this isn't primarily what I'm referring to in the context of football, I keep hearing people claim that the problem with online abuse, whether that's racist, sexist, homophobic, or whatever else it might be, is a problem associated with online anonymity. I can only assume that these people have never been on Facebook. Of course, there is a big problem with anonymous online trolls and the hate that they spew, but the idea that introducing ID checks in order to set up social media accounts will stem the tide of online hatred and abuse is quite frankly one for the birds. Some of the most abhorrent racism you will find online isn't just from Viking legend 212 on Stormfront, it's from 65-year-old women and 59-year-old men on Facebook posts, airing their bigotry with all the pride of a particularly well-endowed naturist exposing their reproductive organs on a nudist beach in Ibiza. So no, removing anonymity will not get rid of hatred, harassment, and abuse on social media. The inspiration for this video was really the exit of Messi and Ronaldo from the Champions League round of 16 though, and the quite frankly bizarre response on social media. Except, it isn't bizarre anymore, is it? It's completely normal. Like politicians not resigning when they're proved to have been corrupt, or only interacting with other human beings via Zoom calls, it's one of those things that used to seem strange, but have now become the norm. I addressed this point on Twitter on Wednesday evening after Barcelona's Champions League exit had been confirmed, by pointing out that if you watch a football match with the sole hope that either Messi or Ronaldo don't win or make a mistake, just so that you can then go on social media and say how it proves one is better than the other, you're not a football fan. It's not the first time I've expressed that sentiment, I think I've said it on this channel in the past, but it's a point that it can't hurt to repeat. Especially since this kind of behaviour has become so normalised that I don't think people often take a step back and think about how bizarre it actually is. As I pointed out, it is akin to football fans in the era of Zico and Platini in the late 70s and early 80s, watching Juventus get knocked out of the European Cup by Hamburg, and then start faxing all their friends telling them it proves Zico is better, and posting letters to random strangers telling them that Platini is a bottle job who stat pads with penalties against Cagliari in Serie A. That may seem ridiculous, and even somewhat amusing, but that is basically what militant Messi and Ronaldo fans do online. Of course, there's nothing wrong with having a preference between the two, and we all have opinions about players, and it's good fun to debate the various merits of Koundé versus Upamecano or Henderson versus Pope with our mates. But once you reach the point at which you are viewing football solely through the lens of a comparison of two players, the sport has lost all meaning. You might as well watch two strangers play Pong and nail your master one of them and send death threats to anyone who thinks that the other guy is better. That is the entire extent of your sporting experience once you've reached that level of psychosis. You might be thinking, that's all well and good, Alfie, and I agree that Messi and Ronaldo obsessives are weird, but that's a pretty small percentage of football fans. Now, I hope you're right, but this isn't an issue restricted solely to the never-ending debate between those two. I've no doubt that the Messi versus Ronaldo debate polarizes people more than most. I mean, I've had people comment saying that they've unsubscribed from the channel because I think Messi is better at football than Ronaldo, which is hilarious and bizarre when you think that this is literally a channel in which I tell stories and give my opinions on football. It would be pretty weird if all 300,000 plus subscribers agreed with every single assessment and opinion on football, or on anything for that matter, that I ever had. But it is broader than that. Just look at how partisan people have become right across the board. You ought to be able to acknowledge when someone is a good player or a good team, whether that's your own team or your fiercest rivals. Of course, football has always been partisan to a certain extent. Most football fans support a certain team, they want to see that team do well, which leads to certain biases in our perceptions of the game. You will rarely find a set of supporters, for example, who feels as though they always get the rub of the green when it comes to refereeing decisions. Yet, almost all of them feel as though their team is particularly hard done by referees. Clearly, that can't be the case, but that is in the nature of watching football through tinted spectacles, and I don't think that is a particularly bad thing. I can remember my granddad bemoaning a fan who sat near him at Hull City and criticised him for saying that an opponent was playing well, as though it made him somehow disloyal. My granddad was taken aback by that reaction at the time, but what was an anomaly when he used to attend games is now the norm. A case in point, a month or so ago, I made a video sharing what I felt was England's best uncapped 11, and I picked Ollie Watkins over Patrick Bamford. Reasonably enough, some people commented saying that they felt Bamford was better than Watkins. A perfectly legitimate point of view, of course, so I put out a poll on Twitter asking people to vote on who they thought was the superior player between the two. Watkins took a bit of an early lead, and then a load of Leeds fans started retweeting it and quote-tweeting it with messages like, "You know what to do, #LUFC, and then a few Villa fans got involved as well, and you can see where it all ended up. Basically, it ceased to be a poll about who was better at football between Ollie Watkins and Patrick Bamford, and turned into a poll on who do you support, Aston Villa or Leeds United. Had I wanted to ask that question, I would have done. To be clear, I'm not just throwing a tantrum because some people ruined my Twitter poll, I'm quite relaxed about that, but it goes to this idea that if you're a Leeds fan who thinks Watkins is better than Bamford, or a Villa fan that thinks Bamford is better than Watkins, or say, a Leicester City fan who thinks that Jack Grealish is better than James Maddison, there is this idea that you're somehow traitorous or less of a fan, which I think has got a lot to do with social media. Of course, it's only natural that those who see more of a player might appreciate his or her talents more, but I think this goes beyond that explanation alone. I call some of these phenomena the social mediaification of football, but there's also the AFTVification of football, which is a distinct, albeit overlapping phenomenon. I don't wish to slag off Arsenal Fan TV, just to be clear, or anyone for that matter, but it would be disingenuous to act as though that channel, and many like it, don't thrive on outrage. And I do think that the AFTVification of football has seen a spike in the fickleness of football fans, who needed no encouragement on that front even before the advent of YouTube and social media. The argument that AFTV and channels like it will always make is that the channel offers a voice for fans, and just reflects the views of genuine supporters. And maybe it does, reflect the views of a small number of supporters, but let's not pretend that there isn't a certain type of fan who doesn't generate more interest and create more viral content, effectively turning these channels into outrage machines. This is what social media and YouTube does. It amplifies outrage and controversy over insight and more reasonable discussion. Again, I want to be clear on two things. One is that I'm not saying football content should be dour analysis of tactics and balance sheets. Football is a passionate sport which provokes strong opinions. The sport is all the richer for them, and secondly, I'm not just pointing the finger at new media in this regard. What is TalkSport if not a perpetual cycle of stupid opinions commented on by idiots? TalkSport is a wing of Talk Radio, owned and operated by News Corp, itself founded and run by Rupert Murdoch. We shouldn't be surprised, therefore, that TalkSport is just the footballing equivalent of shock jocks like Julia Hartley-Brewer and Mike Graham inviting imbecilic guests on to spout their imbecilic opinions and ideas to an imbecilic set of pundits in content that is designed to be consumed by imbeciles until the planet is finally hit by an asteroid and we're all put out of our misery. Because, let's face it, it's what we deserve at this stage. Meanwhile, Murdoch just counts his cash in the hope that it'll be enough to bribe Satan out of throwing him into the fiery furnace of hell whilst plotting to hack his phone in case that doesn't work. For the record, I'm not calling anyone who listens to TalkSport an imbecile, as I'm sure many of you do. I'm saying their show is designed for imbeciles and catered specifically to them. You might still tune in, but you're not the target demographic. It's funny. Sometimes people say to me that I must be good at my job or make really interesting videos because Sevens has close to 400,000 subscribers, or whatever it is, and gets quite a lot of views, making it one of the more popular football channels on YouTube. My answer is not at all. There are channels with far fewer views than mine that are much better, and there are some that are absolute tripe that are 2, 3, even 10 times the size. I won't mention any names, but some of the drivel that I've seen over the last 12 months is enough to give you a brain aneurysm. But evidently, there is an audience for this stuff. I know this to be true just from my own work. My best videos aren't the ones that get the most views. It's not the documentaries about war criminals or corruption scandals, but pithy little videos about Alex Ferguson's last 7 signings. I could get even more views by making really sensationalised stuff, like a lot of channels, with full-on clickbait titles. But I feel as though I probably degrade myself enough on this channel as it is. Whilst the debate surrounding freedom of speech has become so sodomised, particularly in the UK and in the United States, with more bad faith actors than a novel about Cold War spies, that it can be difficult to make heads or tails of it these days, I have long been a believer in the Jeffersonian principle of the marketplace of ideas. The theory that people should be allowed to express stupid, contemptuous, and even insidious ideas because in the marketplace of ideas, truth will triumph over falsehoods, and good ideas will triumph over bad ones. Obviously, I still believe that people should be allowed to express whatever views they want, regardless of how brainless or despicable they may be. But in the age of social media, is there really any reason to believe that truth will triumph, or that good ideas will eventually win the battle of hearts and minds? Do we see much evidence of that? You could be forgiven for suggesting that I've gone a little beyond my remit and have ventured outside of football on occasion, but that is rather the point. What we have seen on social media is a general trend of polarisation, so is it any wonder that football has become so polarised along with it? Football ought to be fun. Why did you fall in love with football? For me, it was the simplicity of the sport, the fine margins, the magic moments, the connection with my dad, and going to games with another father and son who were family friends of ours. I suspect none of you fell in love with the sport because of your passion for Twitter disputes with strangers, the determination to see a manager get sacked, or even a pathological obsession with new signings and transfers. Perhaps that is why this toxicity has been accelerated during the pandemic. An element of football that is so important, supporters, and the atmosphere that they bring, whether you're a match-going fan or not, has been lost. Meanwhile, fans are spending more time stuck at home, more time online, engaging in the type of meaningless social media squabbles, or watching the types of brain-draining outrage manufacturing content that sucks all joy out of what once was, and can still be, the beautiful game. Maybe I am overreacting, but I do have a certain amount of envy of football fans from bygone eras. Perhaps not the hooliganism of the 1970s and 80s, and clearly not the poor safety standards of stadiums prior to the 1990s. But so many elements of the game were less sanitised, more open in terms of both the gap in quality between teams and the games themselves, and just simply more fun. That might be a slightly negative tone to bow out on, and obviously there is still a lot to love about football. Otherwise, I wouldn't still orientate my entire career around the sport. Anyhow, If I've ruined your day, blame William on Twitter, since it was his idea. And of course, there are still non-toxic social media channels like at HITC7s on Twitter and Instagram. I've heard great things about both of them. And you can still watch world-class football-related content on YouTube from channels such as HITC7s, HITC7s, and possibly even the odd other one as well. Thank you all as ever for watching. Give us a like if you enjoyed today's video, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, as I say, to HITC7s. And also, as I just said, you can find me on Twitter or Instagram after I just spent an entire video slagging off social media via the username at HITC7s.